Hi, my name is Abigail Houghton, and today I'm going to be presenting my media report on the country Belarus. I'm going to begin by talking about some of the main political agendas in Belarus. They differ between the two parties. The party in control, that is ran by President Lukashenko, they function under one agenda, and that's to remain in power no matter the amount of fraud, corruption, and threatening that it requires. And the opposing party wishes to overthrow the corrupt regime of Lukashenko and dismantle his fraudulent reelection. And then they hope to go on to establish a true democracy in Belarus. My first article is from the New York Times, and it is titled, "You Cannot Say No, the Reign of Terror That Sustains Belarus's Leader." To summarize this article, I would begin to say that it displays several examples of how President Lukashenko maintains his power. He uses a system of undercover operatives or curators that closely resembles and even bears the same name as the Russian KGB. This vast network of spies is how he protects his power. The article states how in Belarus there are two systems of law, one for actual crimes such as murder and rape, and a second system motivated by politics alone. Belarus's prosecutors, police officers, and court officials are all working to defend Lukashenko's regime. They are all part of the corruption. Lukashenko is able to persuade this outward support by threatening physical harm or imprisonment to those who oppose him. And he's able to enforce this by being able to control the court officials, police officers, and prosecutors. The article gives several examples of people who opposed and then suddenly supported Lukashenko as a result of brutal imprisonment or threats. This article reflects continuity in Belarus because Lukashenko is continuing to spread his influence on officials who will punish his opposition. His re-election is only furthering this continuity. It's continuing to push Belarus further away from the hopes of a true democracy. This article relates to materials covered in class by means of the top-down, bottom-up transitions that we discussed. When Belarus broke away from the USSR and the Communist Party, the new course of government was established and advocated for by the then Prime Minister. Belarus is an example of a top-down transition because the ruling elite introduced this failed attempt at a democratic government. Thus, much of the corruption still lingers. Belarus will most likely see a bottom-up transition in the coming years as organized opposition has grown stronger and more dedicated. The implications that this article sets forth for other countries and world politics is that the world should take note of Belarus as an example of incomplete construction of new governments and how they often morph into an authoritarian regime. We need to help stabilize these new governments abroad, and international coalitions need to be more involved to ensure that they start out strong and correctly and that they will move on to be efficient democracies. My second article is from the New York Times as well, and it is titled, "In Secret Ceremony, Embattled Belarus Strongman is Sworn in as President." To summarize this article, it discusses the illegitimacy of Lukashenko's re-election and the public unrest that it has caused. Lukashenko is at the brink of crisis for his political career. China and Russia are the only major world powers to recognize him as legitimate, and the thousands of daily protesters in Belarus threaten his regime. One former ambassador to Lukashenko referred to him as a nobody and stated that he is no longer president of Belarus, he is just the head of the riot police. The world community does not recognize him as Belarus's legitimate leader, and the citizens of Belarus do not either, and they are fervently protesting against his fraudulent re-election. Excuse me. This article reflects change in Belarus because the people of Belarus are no longer crippled by their fear of Lukashenko's curators and his threats. They begin to step out and voice their opposition to him. The support of the world community is with them now more than it ever has been. and the previous affiliates of Lukashenko's regime that have stepped out against him reflect the changing tide of Belarus politics. This article relates to materials we discussed in class by means of the revolutionary threshold, tipping model, and preference falsification, all that work hand in hand with the collective action problem. The 10,000 protesters in Belarus are an example of a group of people who reached the revolutionary threshold. Lukashenko's fraudulent re-election was the dramatic event that set into motion the tipping model that we discussed in class. The citizens of Belarus are no longer adhering to the previous standard of preference falsification that the threat of his curators demanded. They came to the realization that the risk would be worth the outcome. As more and more citizens outwardly began to oppose his regime, more and more revolutionary thresholds were met, and thus the mass participation that we see in the streets of Belarus, that's where it came from. Some implications that this article presents for other countries and world politics to notice is that political corruption needs to be met with swift opposition and force before it evolves into fraudulent elections. Also, that the right to support the political party of your choice should be defended at all costs. And a definitive legal plan to remove a sitting president or any government official should be included in a new country's constitution. My last and favorite article is from the New York Times as well, and it's titled, "In Belarus, Women Led the Protests and Shattered Stereotypes." This article relates how the political scene in Belarus has been largely fueled by women, which is really interesting because in America, we haven't had the first woman president yet. The leading candidate, who many believe to be the rightful president of Belarus, is a woman. Her campaign was ran by two female colleagues, further adding to Lukashenko's disdain because he publicly undermined women as unfit for politics and only fit for housework, kitchen duties, and motherly duties. Women have also emerged as leaders of the public protest in Belarus. These women may not bring the immediate downfall of Lukashenko, but they will forever have changed Belarus's society to view women as politically competent and capable, and I think that's awesome. This article reflects a major change in the politics of Belarus because women are beginning to be seen as competent and capable when previously they were seen as inferior relative to politics. The widespread support for a female presidential candidate was revolutionary for Belarus. It motivated women all over the country to exercise their own political voices. This article relates to the materials we covered in class relative to the aspect of strategic voting. It was extremely utilized and relied upon by her campaign. Many masculine voters did not necessarily want a female president, but voting for her would prevent the election of their least favorite candidate, Lukashenko. And many of them did that, and by definition, that is strategic voting. And her campaign relied heavily on the strategic vote. They displayed her as a simple woman who was selected by fate to step in the role of the presence of her husband's imprisonment. And many more masculine voters were okay with electing her under this knowledge. Some implications that this article sets forth for other countries and world politics is that women are competent and capable contributors to the political scene, and they should not be dismissed. Seeing women as weak is a thing of the past. Women have time and time again proved to be valuable in the face of male absence, and too many times we just wait till male absence to call on the women population to step forth. World War II psychology analyzes and supports this. In the face of catastrophic events such as war or this mass imprisonment of the male population in Belarus, women step up and are able and capable to perform duties that generally males would perform. The world community should stop isolating women from politics until male presence is diminished and should instead adhere to a standard of continual inclusion of women in politics. And this concludes my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it, and I have really enjoyed this class this year. So thank you, Professor Kim.